the Senate back. I'm not sure what it would take to shock enough people to force movement in Congress as we lead up to 2020. I just don't know what it would take. Would it take 500 dead? Would it take 5,000 dead? How many dead would it take? I'm not sure we are movable on this particular issue, which leaves us vulnerable to one more attack after another, with no means by which to control it, and without the will to do so because we've all given up. I don't get it. But,
Yeah. I think we are moving. You're not seeing it in terms of votes yet, but I think the underlying public sentiment and we do now are supposed to have some research related to the effects of gun violence. The Dickey Amendment, which prohibited any research that could potentially lead to advocacy for gun control, has been lifted a few years ago. So we are moving in a generally positive direction on these things, but I'm not seeing us move very fast. We're moving unfortunately, way too slowly. And unfortunately, that means that more Americans are going to lose their lives. See action, unfortunately.
Is the argument that we need military-style weapons for recreation. I think that was the argument of one of our callers in the last hour, saying, "Well, I just love pulling the trigger and blowing the hell out of something."
I think we could come up with a law that would work for a person like that. Meaning that I've heard that these AK-47s and AR-15s are exciting to shoot. So why don't they just say you can shoot those at a shooting range, and they restrict it? They have to stay there, and you have to get registered with gun safety and all that stuff to do that. But you can't have that in your home. And so I think there are ways that you can let people have their recreational fun time with those things, but keep it within a containment so that it's not a potential danger. Because people are getting these guns legally, and it's just not appropriate because it's just too dangerous.
Well, of course, we know that one of the famed, I guess it was a sniper that was training, young girl with one of the automatic weapons at a range, and the gun was passed to her. She fired it and killed him. So even at a range, they're not safe.
No, and of course, I don't think she should have. I think that was part of their safety protocol that she should never have had that weapon because of her age. But
right.
But I think that's the kind of environment that if that people who enjoy shooting weapons like that want to have it. I think that's the only environment where it should be allowed. And that's certainly a very simple thing where people can still have their weapons. They just have to store it and just use it at those kind of locations.
Well, I'm still of the conclusion that we have for the conversation. It's good to work as the sponsor of our show. I talk about how I like Mike Emery because he's honest and because he's a great mechanic and because he has a great auto repair location in Perpetual Works at 1046 North Beverly. If you trust Mike Emery, and you can too, they know what they're doing, and a great many people that don't know, and the ASC certification that each one has. Profession Auto Works. And if you can read those, it will tell you how many people are absolutely thrilled with the experience of Profession Auto Works. I'm proud to recommend Profession Auto Works and Mike Emery for the repair of my car, and I suggest you call him at 323-8650. I'm John C. Scott. I trust Mike Emery to repair my family's cars. You can too. Back in a moment. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the John C. Scott Political Forum. Brent Davis is a former city council member and a civic leader now. And Brent, well, to see you, you look great.
Well, thank you, John. It's great to be back with you. It's been a few years since I've been here, but you look great.
Thank you. So primary for mayor, aren't you?
I am indeed, yes.
Tell me some of your concerns about this race.
Well, I think the first interesting thing is that the Republicans did not field a candidate this year. And that is unusual because the Republican business community usually likes to have a candidate. So now we're down to basically three Democratic candidates, one who is a sitting city council member, Rahina Romero, one who just came off a race for the governor and 12 years of serving in the legislature, Steve Farley, and then a relative newcomer, Randy Dorman, who's been active in downtown issues and development issues. And then, of course, we have Ed Eckerly, who is the independent candidate, a former Democrat. He's re-registered as independent. So even if you take that, there's still no Republican candidate, which makes it interesting because the decision will be made clearly in about 3 weeks as we process our voting now will be made in the Democratic primary. And of course, the Republican business people have had pulling their hair out as to, how to get involved in this election. No question about it.
Well, how do they do that, really?
Well, I think they give money to behind Steve Farley.
I was asking Regina Romero, why is the business community so anxious about you? Why are they concerned about you? And she didn't think that there was any reason that they should not be. I believe there's a lot of reasons they ought to be concerned about Regina Romero if you follow a lot of her votes. I think there's some clear-cut choices between the three of these candidates.
I think you're correct. Regina clearly represents the left side of the margins, if you will, and she comes out of the Grijalva machine, which is very formidable in this city, and
it'll even be more formidable if she becomes mayor. I'll tell you that right
I know.
now.
And Raul's a good friend, and Regina's a good friend, and they have certainly Raul has been involved since forever. And then Randy's relative newcomer, her big imprint has been downtown, the downtown partnership, which she chairs, and she's done some development. She, of course, did the ice house. The interesting thing is that Randy's money, a lot of her money has come from New York, where she was a branding expert and has a lot of friends. And Regina has elected to run clean elections, so-called clean elections.
Kind of.
Kind of, yes. And, of course, I think that's a bit disingenuous when she has she doesn't have, but there is independent committees that are spending up to $300,000 on her campaign.
PAC money, yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
and you can't say you're not a PAC money if they're spending that on your behalf.
I think it's disingenuous, and also she raised $100,000, then she gets $100,000 matching money. Now Steve Farley has raised $250,000. He is not participating in the program where there's matching city money, and his attitude has been, look, if I don't have to take $100,000, that's another cop or a couple of city employees, and that's his attitude.
Talking with a former city council member, Brent Davis. Here's my analogy of this whole thing. I've followed the city council for almost 50 years, long when you were just born. I'm so much older than you are, but the simple truth of the matter is I've never seen the kind of public support for a city councilor or mayor than I've seen in just the recent year and a half. Jonathan Rothschild has been able to, I think, to meet a social conscience that I think this city has, and also meet the demands of a business community, which needs to be paid attention to because it's the economic engine that keeps everything else going. So with Rothschild as mayor, the city council, wise enough to have Mike Ortega, who I think is the best city manager we've had in literally decades in our town, keep this city moving forward, which it has been, then voters would say yes to more money for roads, which they did. And they would say yes to more money for parks, which they gave. And I think that the next move toward another mayor ought to be somebody that can have the kind of business sense that it takes to do what Rothschild has done, but also have a social conscience as well.
I think that's well put, John.
And I think Farley has that. I'm not so sure those same attributes fall within the particular skills or skill level of Regina Romero.
I would be remiss if I didn't say I think Jonathan Rothschild was an outstanding mayor, and I think you've nailed it. He certainly has led this city well the last 8 years, and he will go down in history as one of Tucson's great mayors. I think the one individual who's running who can pick this up and continue to run in the direction that Jonathan Rothschild has set is Steve Farley. I don't think there's any question about that. I know that when I speak, and I still am active in business, have a company here in town, and I deal with business people all the time. And I won't say they're unanimous, but I would say overwhelmingly support Steve because they think he would be that kind of a mayor. They're very concerned about the left taking charge of the city, and I think they think Regina represents that left, and that's the problem.
And we've seen those times with Bolgi. You can recall some names. I can throw quite a few names at you, even Miller and others, who have literally leaned very much so to the liberal side of politics and to the social conscience of Tucson, and ignoring the business community's, I think, requests and requirements and demands so that they can prosper. And I think that particular siding with one issue after another of the social problems of our community rather than the business challenges had left us in a real dilemma and a conflict as to which direction this city's going to go. I think Farley can do both. That's why I've supported him. And I think that we ought to pay attention to what's happening with Regina Romero, because if she is mayor, I don't see how she could ignore being beholden to the people that gave her a tremendous amount of money. We're talking about the unions, talking about the social service people and others. I just don't think you can say no to her.
Yeah, and I think it's important to point out some of the endorsements. Regina has had several endorsements, which she rightly so should be proud. But the police and fire unions have endorsed Steve Farley, and the Teamster Union has endorsed Steve Farley. And he has support from not just the neighborhoods, which he represented very capably in the legislature for 8 years, 12 years, excuse me. And he is he has a broad appeal, and I think that's the thing that separates him from everyone else. Now, Randy's pretty much a newcomer, and I don't know. So far, the polling I've seen puts Steve out ahead quite a bit, and Regina is in second. And in some of the early polls, Randy was not even registering. But I haven't seen anything really recent. But that's the last poll I saw a couple weeks ago.
I've been impressed with Randy Dorman because of her commitment to downtown and some of the things that she's accomplished that I wasn't even aware of. And I think that she's made a considerable difference in the particular responsibilities that she's been given downtown by people. And we've seen that result in a town that's vibrant now, a downtown that had been vibrant for a long, long time. And that was since, I used to go to the Fox Theater downtown and actually see a movie and go to Steinfeld's and, walk over to any one of the department stores, J.C. Penney's or Hawkeme's or somebody else, and Levy's to do my shopping. And, of course, they all moved out of downtown. But it seems to me that we now have a vibrant downtown, and it's only going to get better.
Yeah, I think so, and I think
thanks to people like Randy.
Yeah, I think Randy deserves some credit for that. I think she has been very, very active in that arena, and as I say, one of the things that we can say about Randy is she jumped into politics to run for mayor, and that is. If it would have been me, if it would have been me, I would have preferred to serve on the city council, which I did, and then I did not run for mayor, but and then step up. But all things said, I think she's a formidable candidate. I think they all three are formidable candidates.
Why do you think the Republicans didn't put anybody up this year? They had a vacancy.
I'll say this so as to not offend my bipartisan friends on the other side. Yeah. I think they have literally given up on running citywide elections in Tucson. I mean, when Steve Kozachik was elected as a Republican now 6 years ago, and he realized very quickly he was not going to be reelected as an R, he changed his party to D, and that made it unanimous 7 slots for 7 Democrats. I'm not even sure that's always healthy. I think checks and balances are good in government, and I've always said that, and I believe that. But that said, this is a Democratic community. The numbers are overwhelming against the Republicans. Now, that said, if they have a good candidate, and they have had good candidates in the past, Lou Murphy, Bob Walkup,
sure,
those candidates, they have run well. Fred Ronstadt, good friend of mine. They have run well, and even Steve Kozachik ran as a Republican the first time. So they can do it, but it's an uphill climb that's just incredible.
Let me ask you this. Do you foresee at any time the annexation of the foothills and the extension of 2 more council seats to 8, and then having the council people elected by ward so that there would be Republicans on the council? Would that be a pretty good payoff if you had all of that revenue from the foothill mansions in your city and help with the HERF funding and whatever else, and give them 2 more council seats? Is that something somebody ought to think about in the distant future?
Well, we've been thinking about it for 30 years.
We have been thinking about it. We've not done anything about it. Mountain to mountain annexation hasn't happened.
And that was Lou Murphy's slogan, mountain to mountain annexation. Yeah. And he was right.
Yeah, he was right. And it just seems to me if we're ever going to grow into a great city, we probably need to consider that. But I don't think that's...
Yeah, I think we ought to consider it. I can tell you this, as a Democrat, and if I were to speak for the Democrats, and I don't really mean to, but if I were, we are in good shape under the current system.
Right. And no question about that.
Yeah, I represented Ward 2, which is the Northeast Ward, and I lost my ward in both of my elections and won all the other wards.
Right.
And that's just how the system worked.
Right.
But that's the same as the current president saying he lost the popular vote, but that's not the rules. The rules are electoral college. So that's the way you got to play the rules.
What do you think the great challenges for the city are in the near future, the next 10 years?
Well, I think the biggest problem the city has is I don't think I think crime is an issue, no question about it. When I ran in 1979, John, I pulled out my literature: crime, transportation, and I had water.
Right, sure.
And I think we've got water under control, and how we've gotten it under control is it's so damned expensive that it's under control. And crime, we've got a problem with our officers, and transportation has really improved recently. But I think the real question is what's going to be the identity of Tucson in the future. Are we going to be a progressive city that welcomes business, or are we going to be a city that stands and says, no, we don't want any more people down here or no more business? If you look at what's happened with some of the ordinances that the council has passed, the unintended consequences, a lot of the major development and industry is going outside the city limits.
Sure, you're right.
And that's what happened to all those East Coast cities or eastern cities, in the 60s and 70s. Hey, you had flight to the suburbs and outside the city limits. And I hope that doesn't go for Tucson, because that would be a death to us.
And, we watched Marana come into the Ina Road corridor and just kick our ass and take all those businesses, which would have generated millions and millions of Tucson. And we lost that battle.
I mean, $1 billion. But the discretionary expenditure, maybe $100,000.
Yeah.
Everything else is locked with the pension issue and the employments, the wages and everything. And you said something earlier I want to comment on. Mike Ortega is a fabulous city manager, just fabulous. And I don't always agree with him, but that's not what makes a good city manager, agreeing with me.
And you'd have a great trivia game to go back and name all the city managers of the last 25 years, and you couldn't do it. I bet I can't find one soul in Tucson that could remember them all.
I'd have to think about it. It'd be pretty close.
Yeah. Well, it seems to me, too, that as you take a look at the city, it has to come back to basic services. You've got to have police and fire. They have to be adequately staffed, and they have to be adequately funded. And then you turn around, you have to say we have to have safe streets. And we were killing pedestrians at a pretty good rate the last couple of years, and finally you see a lot of work on our major thoroughfares with these signs going up and flashing lights going, say, don't kill me.
Yeah.
I'm going to walk across this street, don't kill me.
And the hawk crossings, that's the big thing.
Sure.
I agree with you that those are the problems. But unless we allow business into our city, unless we allow the newest Walmart to be built in our city and the newest Target and what have you, we don't have the sales tax revenue to finance better police, to finance better transportation. That's the issue.
We've seen a dramatic change, too, I think, with the money from Mexico that's being spent here in southern Arizona. It's by the billions of dollars. The trading money between Mexico and the United States is essential to our future.
Yes.
And I think we have to have somebody as mayor of this town that's going to understand that and nourish that. And Farley has made the pledge to do so.
Yes, he has. And it's even more critical given the current administration and their relationship with Mexico, or lack of relationship, whatever it is.
Indeed, it is. As you take a look at Tucson, what else is on your mind that you think?
Well, I think one of the interesting things that's happening to Tucson is you're going to see, this is a prediction I'm going to make, you're going to see a resurgence in Cochise County for development down there. I believe the villages at Vigneto are going to be approved here eventually.
They come after the Forest Service had a weirdness play there, but we're talking about a lot of homes there.
About 22 to 28,000 homes, and you're talking about
everything.
Cochise County has a population of 125,000, and it's actually down from 10 years ago, 10,000. If this goes through, the entire economic future of Cochise County changes, and I think that'll relate very well to Tucson, because the people who are going to be building those houses and supplying the supplies for those houses are Tucson businesses.
There's been one consistency with the county government of Pima, and that has been Chuck Huckleberry.
Yes.
For these decades. And for Chuck Huckleberry fans, they think this has been the best thing that's ever happened. His long tenure as the top administrator and czar of Pima County, but that's going to change. He's not going to be there forever. It'll be interesting to see how Pima County changes when we change chief administrators.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see whether they pick from somebody that is a deputy now,
Yes.
or whether they go on a national search.
Right.
But I happen to agree, Chuck has been great. And, you know, when I was on the city council, we had our Chuck Huckleberry. His name was Joel Valdez.
Yes, who was.
And I shout out to Joel if he's listening, because he is a great friend, and he was a wonderful city manager.
And he was there forever and knew how to make it work.
He knew how to make it work, and that's the key.
Well, what do you think the turnout's going to be in this race? It's an all mail-in ballot.
Yeah, and I have to tell you, I'm a traditionalist. I'm getting too old. I believe there should be an election day, and that's when you go to elect. So
Yeah,
I struggle with filling out that mail ballot, but I will.
I did that myself this morning. Because I've always gone to the polls, always.
It could be upwards of 50%. I mean, there's a lot of money being spent.
That's pretty high turnout.
It would be. There's a lot of money being spent on voter turnout, and I mean, you consider we're going to probably spend close to $800,000 on this.
That's unheard of in a city election like this.
It is.
We've never seen anything like that.
And
before.
then you still got the final election to come, the general election, and then Ed Ackerley will enter in as the independent, and there'll be a race. But I don't think an independent is going to be.
He's a bright guy, though.
He's
done a lot of hard work of really trying to figure out what he's running for and what he's doing. I've interviewed him. I don't know how many times I've been so impressed with the knowledge that he's gained. All right, but your choice in the mayoral race of the three Democrats is Steve Farley.
That's correct.
All right. Well, Councilman, thanks for being on the show. It's good to see you again. I'm
Good.
glad you're still very active, and we're a better city because you've been here, and thank you so much for being on our show today.
Thank you, John. Appreciate it very much.
Brent Papers, former city councilman of the John C. Scott Show. We'll be back with more of the John C. Scott Political Forum after these messages.